truffle ganache, right?
Yeah, so there's 2 parts chocolate to 1 part cream. So you have a lot more chocolate to cream, right? Mass. So what happens is if you just keep the pastels the size they are, a lot of times the heavy cream is not hot enough to melt the mass of chocolate, right? So you either pre-melt your chocolate, which works, or you finely chop it. I decided to finely chop it today, and we have the food processor out. The other reason why I finely chopped it instead of melted it, it takes a little bit of time for the ganache to set up enough to pipe. So I figured by finely chopping it this time, I wouldn't be bringing up the heat of the final ganache as much. That was my theory behind it. But either one of the reason is because you don't have as much heavy cream to melt the chocolate, okay? The other, I'm doing the maple bourbon. So all of the chocolates though, you're gonna either chop or pre-melt, okay? Every recipe. All the recipes except for the muscadine call for some other kind of sugar. So it could be honey, could be maple syrup, could be invert. Recipe tells you to put it in with the chocolate. I find that it works. I put mine in, it's fine. But you can also mix it in with your heavy cream. It helps dissolve it better, so you can do that instead. So you're gonna put your invert sugar, your glucose, maple syrup, honey, any of those liquid sugars in with your heavy cream instead of with the chocolate like it says, okay? It works either way. So if you forget, it's fine. Just dissolves a little bit better. Then the butter is important in this recipe, that the butter is room temperature and soft. The ganache itself, we're not going to add the butter into the ganache until it's around 95 degrees. If it's too hot and you add the butter just liquefies and it doesn't really make a nice smooth emulsion. So the idea is that you wait for it to be about 95 above body temperature. If it's too cold, you'll have lumps of butter that you'll never get out of there. So you need to make sure the ganache is still on the warm side, your butter's room temperature, and you're adding that in at the end. And then the liquors go in at the end also, okay? You need the butter to incorporate. Sometimes if it's really hot, I'll put the alcohol in first to help cool it down instead of waiting for it to reach 95, and then I'll use the butter. You gotta adapt a little bit. So for the maple bourbon, in the pot I have the maple and I have the heavy cream. I brought it to a boil. The recipe tells you to gradually add the heavy cream in. If you pre-melt your chocolate, I would do that, but if you gradually add it little bit at a time, you're adding liquid into the chocolate and your chocolate will seize. So sometimes people say, oh look, it doesn't look good. It's because you didn't add enough chocolate. So this is another reason why I bring it to a boil and I pour it over the top. Just like we make ganache, okay? Not to overthink it, just to simplify it. Bring it to a boil, scrape out everything in your pot because you need all that cream. Otherwise your formula, your ratio will be off. Okay? Cover it. Give it a minute or two to melt, okay? The other variation is the caramel. So the caramel starts with doing a dry cooked caramel sugar in the pot itself and deglazing it. So everybody's comfortable now making dry caramel, right? What team was making that? Okay. And then you're deglazing it with the heavy cream and you're making your caramel flavored milk, right? The other one is the green tea. Same idea, you're making a flavored, all of these you'll see the kind of similarity. When you're making truffles, you flavor your bases. So this one has the maple in here, but the green tea, you're infusing powdered matcha green tea into the heavy cream. You know, if you wanted to do spices like cinnamon sticks and stuff, you can infuse it into your heavy cream. You're having flavored heavy cream. So caramel flavored cream, so on. The other one is the ginger. That's a little bit different. So the ginger, who's doing ginger? Okay. So this one is a very important step in the very beginning. It tells you to blanch the ginger. What happens is if you use fresh ginger and you're putting it in the cream, there's an enzyme that makes the cream curdle. So it's not very smooth. So you need to make sure that first step you do it. So you put it in the water, you bring it to a boil, and then you're infusing ginger into your cream. So again, ginger flavored cream. The first step is just blanching it, okay, to kind of cook it out a little bit. Okay, this is sat for a little bit, so now I can stir. So I'm starting in the center, and I said I wanted to make an emulsion. I want it to be nice and smooth. Ideally with ganache, okay, air in ganache isn't good because air promotes bacteria growth. So that being said, I'm not trying to whip this in a machine to cool it off. Sometimes, and I'm going to show you a recipe tomorrow, I think, second half of class tomorrow, where we use a food processor, and it's kind of cheating, but it works, because if you have lumps of butter, and if anybody has lumps of butter today, we'll do this. You food process it very, very quickly, 30 seconds pulsing it just to kind of emulsify the butter in, and then that's it. What happens with that, you do get some air pockets, but you just have to be careful, kind of tap them out a little bit. Everybody see how nice this is, where I'm just going in the center here and stirring a little slowly, slowly, slowly. And if you give the heavy cream time for the chocolate to melt, you'll get there. So I'm starting in the center, and the goal is to have a really, really smooth, silky ganache and as little possible air bubbles. So I'm going to do this, then I'm going to check my temperature. I most likely will add the liquor first. For some reason, if your ganache was on the cool side though, already at 95, I would add my butter first, right? Because I want to make sure that this is not too cold, my butter melts inside. So in the center. Then I'm going to scrape my sides.
The maple was already in the cream.
Yeah.
And that was the chocolate and the sugar?
The invert sugar was in, I'm going to say it was in the cream. It was in my chocolate, but it was in the, put it in the cream. So your maple syrup, your invert sugar is in this cream, or your honey, or invert, or your glucose is all with the cream. And I would recommend doing the chopping. Make sure you guys also pay attention to which chocolate you're using, because they're not all semi-sweet. So when you're using milk or white, those recipes also take longer to set up because there's more fat in those. All right, so I'm smooth, right? I'm gonna check my temperature. The other truffle that's a variation, who's doing the strawberry ones?
Is that the strawberry green tea?
That's a separate one. Each are doing two. So you're doing strawberry. One other team's doing strawberry.
No, there's only one team.
Really? I thought I put two. Sorry. Oh, because strawberry makes a big batch. I did it. So the strawberry is the only one that's different. It's made with puree. Thank you. Strawberry puree as the liquid, as the heavy cream. So it's a really nice strawberry white chocolate flavor. And that one's on the soft side. You would never be able to pipe that and then pick it up and roll it. But they sell these truffle molds. I'm going to pass it around. So it's a shell that they come in dark white and milk. These are all white for what we're doing. Take one out of here. So they come in a whole sheet like this. They're pretty expensive, but we used to use these at the hotel. If you're not set up to do truffles somewhere, it's kind of a good investment because the shell's made for you already. All you have to do is make a filling. Sorry guys, I'm at 95 now, so I'm gonna add my butter while I talk. So that was good. I would recommend doing that. The caramel's the only one, since you have to make caramel, it gets really, really hot. That one, you might have to take a little bit of time to cool it down. But I would recommend robo-cooling the chocolate, like I did, instead of pre-melting it. And I'm just gonna add a couple pieces at a time, mushing it with my finger and stirring it. So the truffle shells are expensive. Could be, I've bought them for 50 cents a piece, sometimes 75. You broke it. Okay,
No, I thought it opened. I'm sorry.
they make
On
them.
the outside. Is it?
Well, they make them in the way they sheet them in a mold. You can see the seam. That's probably the one negative, that you see the lines if you coat it with too thin amount of chocolate. Lint. If you ever bite into a Lindt chocolate, you know that it's a shell. You can see it. But they also do these where you can line them up. This is good for production. If you're doing a bunch of them, fill them with a sauce gun. Then they make molds that you put on top of it, and you can cap it. So you have to fill these in, cap it with a piece of chocolate so it's completely sealed in. And it just kind of helps you. If you're in a kitchen environment that's really hot and you can't pipe chocolate like we're gonna do, it's a good thing to use. Cost more, but labor is less.
This is white chocolate.
This is white chocolate, yes. So the strawberry one gets filled in a white chocolate shell, and tomorrow you're gonna temper white chocolate for the strawberry one. Some people are gonna do milk, some people are white, some people do semi-sweet. What's your question?
No, you had to do.
Oh, okay. But they come in all different. These shells you can buy different. Okay, so I'm still adding pieces, just mushing it with my fingers. Not one at a time, like don't go too slow, get it in there. So worst case scenario, if your chocolate doesn't melt, you can first start by just 1, 2, 3ing it over, if your butter doesn't melt in all the way, You can 1, 2, 3 it over a water bath. But go slow because we ideally don't want to warm this up and liquefy the butter too much. We want to just get it mixed in there. The other option, like I said, is to use immersion blender or the food processor to smooth it out if need be. So the first thing you should do is pull out some butter. Scale your butter out for both butters out for your recipe. So you know that it's melted, or not melted, but soft enough, sorry, to incorporate. I think I listed all of them. Armagnac is just a liquor flavored one. Nice, strong flavor, but those are nice. Muscadine, I told you, is another liquor, and they're shaped into logs. 5 Spice ends up tasting kind of like chai. 5 Spice ones. I thought I threw something in. All right, so I'm just mushing the butter into this and stirring. My butter was on the soft side. It still takes a while to incorporate in. But you get a smoother emulsified ganache if you do it this way, and you don't add it if it's way too hot. You wouldn't want to pour like melted butter into it. So once you know that all your butter's in, almost there, I'm going to add my liquor. The other thing you want to be careful of, once you make this ganache and it's nice and smooth, you don't want to keep stirring it. Once your ganache sets up enough that like it's that chocolate pudding consistency that I can pipe and it'll hold its shape, if you keep stirring it, your ganache will break. You'll break the emulsion because it's already setting up on you. And I've seen that happen where it looks kind of grainy. So when we pour this onto the saran wrap, we're going to keep an eye on it. I'm going to show you how you're going to check it. We're not going to keep stirring it. That's what you do not want to do. Almost there. There's one little piece of butter I saw in here, so I'm gonna keep pressing it out. This looks good. I can tell the temperature of this is better. All right. Now I'm gonna add my liquor. Quite a bit of bourbon. So the more alcohol you add, it means the ganache center is gonna be softer, right? It's more liquid. The goal behind these truffles is to bite into them tomorrow and have a crisp tempered shell and have a soft inside, right? So it's not all the same consistency. All right, so then I'm gonna add my liquor, a little bit at a time, again, working in the center. So I keep it emulsified. When we pipe these tomorrow, we're going to pipe them about 14-gram little balls. I'm sorry, we pipe them today, not tomorrow. And I'll show you what that looks like, how we're going to do that. Because again, these are very sweet. There's a lot of alcohol. We're not looking to make golf ball sized truffles. We wanted these to be as even and consistent as possible.
These are the centers, right?
These are the centers, yep. Tomorrow we're going to be coating them. So just a little bit at a time. If you wanted to put less alcohol in these, you could. The only thing is you're going to have softer centers, firmer centers. So, you know, if you're really formulating a recipe, it's not as easy with these kind of things to just say, okay, I'm going to put less alcohol. You have to adjust, maybe put more heavy cream. So I don't like to play around with it too much, but if you're reducing it by the liquor by 25%, I wouldn't worry about it. Let's say you wanted to remove the liquor altogether, then I would. There's a lot of liquid in the recipe, right? And as you all know, pastry is all formulation, so you can't always just take it out and expect it to have the same consistency. So I'm smooth, okay? Smooth, shiny, no chocolate. It takes a little bit of time, but take your time to do that. Pour it onto your plastic lined sheet pan. Doesn't matter how it looks, You don't really have to spread it out too much, but I'm going to show you. You want to spread it out a little bit because we're waiting for this to set up, so we don't want to leave it all in one pile. Just going to spread it out to the edges a little bit, and then that's it. And then what I'm going to do is every once in a while, I'm going to go to it and I'm going to check it. I'm going to check it by pushing the sides. And I'm going to look for it to not move. I'm not going to keep stirring it. I'm going to pull this back again. I'm just going to pull it out like this and wait for it to hold its shape. Obviously it's spreading, okay, so it's not ready. This you have to be careful. If you wait too long and this turns into a solid ganache, you can't pipe it. It's really, really hard to pipe it. So be careful. People in wind tunnels, be careful where you put this. If you're going to put it under your wind tunnel, fine. Just be prepared with a half sheet pan and a piping tip. I have the smaller one, the 804. You could use the 804, you could use the larger round one. If you use the larger round one, you have to make sure you don't squeeze as hard, right? You have a little bit more control over using the smaller ones. The muscadine one, you could use this one as well. The muscadine, when you pipe it, you're going to try to get the same shape as the tip, right? So when you're applying pressure, you're not going to squeeze too hard because we want this kind of size cylinder. This is all I'm doing. I'm going to call you over every once in a while and have you look at it. When I'm ready to pipe, I'll call you over. What I want you guys first to do is pull out your butter, start scaling for that first recipe. The first recipe is what takes the longest. After that starts working, you can move on to your next one.